St. Augustine, Commentary on the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 10 to 29, Tractatus 121. Mary Magdalene had brought the news to his disciples, Peter and John, that the Lord was taken away from the sepulchre. And they, when they came thither, found only the linen cloths wherewith the body had been shrouded. And what else could they believe but what she had told them, and what she had herself also believed? Then the disciples went away again unto their own home, that is to say, where they were dwelling, and from which they ran to the sepulchre. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre, weeping. For while the men returned, the weaker sex was fastened to the place by a stronger affection. And the eyes which had sought the Lord and had not found him, had now nothing else to do but weep, deeper in their sorrow that he had been taken away from the sepulchre than that he had been slain on the tree. Seeing that in the case even of such a master, when his living presence was withdrawn from their eyes, his remembrance also had ceased to remain. Such grief, therefore, now kept the woman at the sepulchre. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre. Why she did so, I know not, for she was not ignorant that he whom she sought was no longer there, since she had herself also carried word to the disciples that he had been taken from thence. Why then, while they too had come to the sepulchre and had sought the Lord's body, not merely by looking but also by entering, and had not found it? What then does it mean that as she wept, she stooped down and looked again into the sepulchre? Was it that her grief was so excessive that she hardly thought she could believe either their eyes or her own? Or was it rather by some divine impulse that her mind led her to look within? For look she did, and saw two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. Why is it that one was sitting at the head and the other at the feet? Was it since those who in Greek are called angels are in Latin nuntii, in English new bearers, that in this way they signified that the gospel of Christ was to be preached from head to foot, from the beginning even to the end? They say to her, Woman, why do you weep? She said unto them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. The angels forbade her tears, for by such a position, what else did they announce but that which in some way or other was a future joy? For they put the question, Why do you weep? As if they had said, Weep not. But she, supposing they had put the question from ignorance, unfolded the cause of her tears, because she said, They have taken away my Lord, calling her Lord's inanimate body her Lord, meaning a part for the whole, just as all of us acknowledge that Jesus Christ is the only Son of God, our Lord, who of course is at once both the Word and soul and flesh, was nevertheless crucified and buried, while it was only his flesh that was laid in the sepulchre. And I know not, she added, where they have laid him. This was the greater cause of sorrow, because she knew not where to go to mitigate her grief. But the hour had now come when the joy, in some measure announced by the angels who forbade her tears, was to succeed the weeping. Lastly, when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. Jesus said unto her, Woman, why do you weep? Whom do you seek? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said unto him, Sir, if you have borne him hence, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said unto her, Mary. She turned herself and said unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Let no one speak ill of the woman because she called the gardener Sir, and Jesus Master. For there she was asking, here she was recognizing. There she was showing respect to a person of whom she was asking a favor. Here she was recalling the teacher of whom she was learning to discern things human and divine. She called one Lord Sir, whose handmaid she was not, in order by him to get at the Lord to whom she belonged. In one sense, therefore, she used the word Lord when she said, They have taken away my Lord, and in another when she said, Sir, Lord, if you have borne him hence. For the prophet also called those lords who were mere men, but in a different sense from him of whom it is written, The Lord is his name. Psalm 68, verse 4. But how was it that this woman, who had already turned herself back to see Jesus, when she supposed him to be the gardener and was actually talking with him, is said to have again turned herself in order to say unto him, Rabboni? But just because when she then turned herself in body, she supposed him to be what he was not, while now, when turned in heart, she recognized him to be what he was. Jesus said unto her, Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. There are points in these words which we must examine with brevity indeed, but with somewhat more than ordinary attention. For Jesus was giving a lesson in faith to the woman who had recognized him as her master and called him so in her reply. And this gardener was sowing in her heart, as in his own garden, the grain of mustard seed. What then is meant by touch me not? And just as if the reason of such a prohibition would be sought, he added, For I am not yet ascended to my Father. What does this mean? If, while standing on earth, he is not to be touched, how could he be touched by men when sitting in heaven? For certainly before he ascended, he presented himself to the touch of the disciples when he said, as testified by the evangelist Luke, Handle me and see, for a spirit has not flesh and bones as you see me have. Luke chapter 24, verse 39. Or, when he said to Thomas the disciple, Reach hither your finger, and behold my hands, and put forth your hand, and thrust it into my side. And who could be so absurd as to affirm that he was willing indeed to be touched by the disciples before he ascended to the Father, but refused it in the case of women till after his ascension? But no one even had any the will was to be allowed to run into such folly. For we read that women also, after his resurrection, before his ascension to the Father, touched Jesus, among whom was Mary Magdalene herself. For it is related by Matthew that Jesus met them and said, All hail! And they approached and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Matthew chapter 28, verse 9. This was passed over by John, but declared as the truth by Matthew. It remains therefore that some sacred mystery must lie concealed in these words, and whether we discover it or utterly fail to do so, yet we ought to be in no doubt as to its actual existence.